The ballroom of the Meridian. Global Summit shimmered with glass, chandeliers, and quiet power. Every table was dressed in white linen, every chair aligned with mathematical precision, every conversation carefully calibrated to sound casual while carrying millions of dollars beneath each word. CEOs, hedge fund managers, startup founders, and legacy investors moved through the space like planets in slow, confident orbits. At the center of this universe stood Eleanor Whitmore, CEO of Whitmore Technologies, young, brilliant, and famously unyielding. At 38, she had turned a struggling software firm into a global powerhouse, and she wore her success like armor. Her tailored suit was immaculate, her posture straight, her smile practiced and selective. She shook hands like a queen granting favors, not like a peer meeting equals. When the host announced the arrival of late attendees, Eleanor barely looked up from her conversation. Then the murmurs shifted. A few heads turned. A few smiles tightened. An elderly black man entered the ballroom slowly, leaning on a simple wooden cane. His suit was old-fashioned but clean, charcoal gray with cuffs slightly frayed. His hair was silver, cropped close, and his face carried deep lines etched by time, patience, and something quieter than pride. His name, announced politely but without fanfare, was Harold Bennett. Harold moved without hurry, greeting people softly, his voice warm but restrained. Some nodded back. Some pretended not to see him. When he reached Eleanor, he stopped and extended his hand. For a moment, the room seemed to hold its breath. Eleanor looked at the hand, then at his face, then smiled thinly. She did not take it. Instead, she adjusted the folder in her arms and said, "I'm afraid I'm in the middle of something," before turning slightly away to address another executive beside her. The silence that followed was sharp and uncomfortable. Harold did not react the way some expected. He did not flinch, did not protest, did not withdraw in shame. He simply lowered his hand, nodded once, and said quietly, "Of course. I wish you a successful evening." Then he walked on, his cane tapping softly against the marble floor. Eleanor felt a flicker of something she could not name, but she dismissed it instantly. She had built her career by trusting instincts and ignoring sentiment. Appearances mattered. Power mattered. Old men with no visible entourage did not matter, especially at events like this. If Harold Bennett had been important, she would have known. Her assistants would have briefed her. His name would have carried weight. Instead, it sounded like dust in history. Across the room, however, a few seasoned investors exchanged glances. One of them, a gray-haired woman named Margaret Liu, watched Eleanor with narrowed eyes. She knew that name. Harold Bennett. Very few did. Fewer still understood what it meant. The next morning, Eleanor arrived at her office to find her executive assistant, pale and shaking. "Eleanor," she said, "we have a problem." Eleanor barely paused, slipping off her coat. "Define problem," she replied. The assistant swallowed. 3 major investors pulled out overnight. 2 more are requesting emergency meetings, and the Eastbrook Fund just froze negotiations. Eleanor stopped walking. Eastbrook was everything. Without it, the expansion project would collapse. "Why?" she asked sharply. The assistant hesitated. They cited concerns about leadership. Judgment. Eleanor felt a cold pressure settle in her chest. Judgment? That was not a word people used lightly. She demanded meetings. Calls were made. Emails sent. Doors closed. By noon, the truth began to surface, whispered and reluctant. Someone had posted about last night. Not publicly, not loudly, but where it mattered. Private networks. Investor circles. Quiet channels of influence. The story was simple and devastating. Eleanor Whitmore had publicly refused to shake Harold Bennett's hand. By afternoon, Eleanor finally asked the question she should have asked before. Who is Harold Bennett? The answer arrived like a slow avalanche. Harold Bennett was one of the earliest backers of modern infrastructure bonds. He had quietly financed minority-owned firms decades before it was fashionable. He was a kingmaker who never sought credit, a man whose approval carried more weight than press releases or market trends. He did not threaten. He did not punish. He simply withdrew support. And when he did, others followed. Eleanor sat alone in her office long after sunset, staring at the city lights. For the first time in years, she felt something close to fear. Not fear of failure, but fear of exposure. The kind that strips away excuses and leaves only truth behind. By the next morning, Eleanor was no longer in control of the narrative. Her board demanded explanations. Her phone rang without pause. Every apology drafted by her communications team felt hollow. This was not a PR issue. It was personal. She learned that Harold Bennett had declined all interview requests. All calls, all statements. He had said only one thing to one person. "I'm not angry. I'm just done." Those words echoed louder than any accusation. Against her advisor's objections, Eleanor did something she had never done before. She asked for Harold Bennett's address. It was not a penthouse. It was not guarded by security. It was a modest brick house in a quiet neighborhood, shaded by old trees. When Eleanor stood on the porch, dressed plainly without assistants or cameras, she felt smaller than she ever had in a boardroom. Harold opened the door himself. He looked surprised but not impressed. For a moment neither spoke. Then Eleanor did something she had rehearsed and rewritten 100 times in her mind. She reached out her hand. "Mr. Bennett," she said, her voice unsteady, "I owe you an apology. Not for business, for who I was." Harold looked at her hand for a long moment. Then he did not take it. He stepped aside. "Come in," he said. "If you're going to beg, at least sit down." They talked for hours. Not about money. Not about investments. Harold spoke about being invisible in rooms where he had built the walls. About being dismissed with smiles sharper than insults. About how power without humility rots from the inside. Eleanor listened. Truly listened. She cried once quietly, ashamed not because she was losing everything, but because she realized how easily she had discarded someone's dignity. When she finally left, Harold did not promise anything. He simply said, "Do better. Whether I forgive you or not shouldn't be your motivation." The next week, Eleanor stood before her board and took full responsibility. She did not deflect. She did not explain away. She changed policies, leadership structures, and her own role. Some investors returned. Some did not. Harold Bennett never invested in Whitmore Technologies. Years later, Eleanor would say that losing his money saved her company, but earning his lesson saved her soul.